Moody flushed. Throws it down. Caught by Boston College. I don't believe it. It's a touchdown.
He's got three people down there. The ball's up in the air. Caught. Touchdown.
All right, welcome everybody to the College Football Retro Show. My name is Dan Murphy, your co-host. I'm here along with my co-host Brian Barnes. Brian, how you doing?
Fired up, Dan. It's a great time to talk college football, regardless of what month it is, and we're just getting into July, but college football isn't too far away, so I'm excited to have a good show tonight.
Yeah, so this is a podcast we've been talking about doing for quite a long time now. The timing just hasn't worked out, but we felt that now was the time to do it. A lot of reasons for it, but a big thing, man, with these college football playoffs expanding, it just feels like college football isn't ever going to be the same again, man.
No, and we go back a long way, and we've been college football geeks really for quite a long time, and we've had conversations about what is the best way to determine a national champion in college football, and we still don't really know if right now what's going on is the best way to determine a national champion, but the game has evolved immensely. But you and I are a little bit older, and we kind of miss the days of yesteryear, back when things were kind of simpler, and the regular season games, there was so much on those outcomes that like nowadays you can get away with a regular season loss or two and things will still be okay. And so we remember when it wasn't like that. And
Yes.
so we're fired up to look back at those times and talk about, how we felt watching those games.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, and we'll mention this a lot, it just used to be better. It used to be better. And I don't think that's just, I mean, we are getting older. There's a lot of nostalgia. A lot of these games we're going to cover are games that we watched as kids or young adults, when our fandom was at its peak. But I still think, man, you just look at it from a whole, it just used to be better from a lot of different aspects. I mean, even the little things, and we'll go over it as we play some of these videos, but the music and the graphics, and I mean, a big thing that stands out to me is the announcers. We're going to get Keith Jackson and Bob Greasy for this one that we're going to cover, but man, you're going to hear in the intro here and the open of the video, you're going to hear Keith Jackson's voice and the way he introduces the game, and it's just you don't have broadcasters like that anymore. No offense to some of the broadcasters out there. There are some good ones, but man, the Keith Jacksons of the world just aren't there anymore.
No, Gus Johnson fans might say differently, but I agree with you. Jackson and those guys back in the day were something else. And you're right. And, we definitely are going to sound like boomers, probably a little bit to some people with these podcasts, but things were different back then. And we feel like things were a lot simpler with college football. You knew who was playing every week, and you knew who was going to be on the roster every week, and you didn't have to worry about, guys transferring or opting out or anything like that. And so, all the games were magnified. The importance of the regular season games back in the day were magnified, and that's what is missing today. And it's okay for two things to be correct at once, right? It's okay for the playoff to be pretty cool and home games, playoff home games right on campus. Those can all be cool. But, we can still say also at the same time that, man, back in the day when the regular season games meant something, that was fantastic.
Yeah, the game we're going to cover today is the 1990 Michigan State game. Big reason we wanted to do this game, do a Michigan State game, is we wanted to connect with our website, which is the Michigan Sports and Entertainment, and that's where you're going to be able to find this podcast on the Michigan Sports and Entertainment YouTube page, as well as our website, michigansportsentertainment.com. So in connection with that, we really wanted to kind of focus on Michigan and we thought this is one of the classic games of this rivalry. One of the most controversial. The ending is incredibly dramatic. You have some big names in this game with Desmond Howard and who would go on to win the Heisman Trophy the next year in '91. But just really kind of the height of this rivalry and kind of encapsulates everything this rivalry is. You have Michigan coming into the game as the number one team in the country. Michigan State was unranked. We were going to show in a video, but Jack Root, a name I haven't thought of in a long time, one of the classic sideline reporters who's reporting for ABC for this game, shows a T-shirt that was going around Michigan campus, number one versus no one. And it just shows like, and Brian, I'll let you get into it a little bit because you talk a lot about Michigan State's kind of inferiority complex, and we all know whether you're a Michigan fan or not, and especially if you're not a Michigan fan and don't like them, you know Michigan's arrogance. Like Michigan has always been blasted for how arrogant they can be, and those T-shirts that were going around campus just exemplified that.
Yeah, that's a great example of it, right? Like let little brother know,
Yeah,
where they stand, right? Like who the number one team was, and how they feel about Michigan State. But yeah, all of that, Dan, is 100% correct. I mean, this rivalry, as you know, in any type of rivalry game in college football, as the saying goes, you throw out the records, and the records don't matter. But these were two teams that were pretty good that year. Both finished. It was a weird year in the Big Ten, 1990. There was a four-team tie for first place in the Big Ten, all at 6-2 in the Big Ten. Illinois, Iowa, Michigan, and Michigan State all had a claim to the Big Ten championship, and which is very rare. And
yeah,
so there was some really good football then. Michigan State finished 8-3-1. They tied their first week against Syracuse, and it's funny. I remember being, almost 12 years old, watching that game really late, being fired up for a tie, right? Back when they had ties back then. But in Michigan State's three losses, they lost by a combined 9 points, and they were a really good team. And then Michigan, again that year, they finished 9-3. They lost their three losses were by a combined 6 points. So it's crazy to think how close both of those teams could have been outright Big Ten championships with a shot to go to the Rose Bowl. And if either of those teams only have one loss, there's an outside chance they could have been playing for the national title
yeah.
back then. So things were different, but those were again it was good times for both schools in East Lansing and Ann Arbor. Michigan ended up playing in the Gator Bowl in January on New Year's Day against Mississippi. They won that game 35-3. In Michigan State, the day before in the John Hancock Bowl against USC, they won 17-16. So again, good football teams, early season game. And I personally like as a fan, Dan, I don't know how you feel. So with all transparency, I grew up more of a Michigan State fan. I respect all schools, and all programs now. How you cannot respect Michigan and what they've done in their long history. But I kind of like it when the game is played a little bit later in the schedule. This one was fairly
Yeah.
early, I want to say.
Yeah, a lot of times this is one of the earlier Big Ten games on the schedule, and I don't. I'm not a fan of that. I'd rather it be later. But from Michigan's standpoint, they got Ohio State at the end of the season, so from their standpoint, they probably don't want it too close. They probably prefer to have it a little bit more in the middle. And they used to be. I mean, you mentioned that Michigan lost to Notre Dame with the first game of the season, so it's kind of has to be somewhere a little bit earlier, a little bit more in the middle, because they have three huge rivalries with Notre Dame starting off, Michigan State, and then Ohio State. So I think from Michigan's standpoint, they would have preferred to be a little bit separated.
I get that, and from a program perspective, Michigan is still one of those programs, to this day, who they're getting their opponent's very best. Like that's a game circled
Yeah.
on the
Oh yeah.
schedule that they know that they're going to bring it, and so Michigan, I'm with you. They probably like the spaced out rivalry games.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Brian, I'm gonna let you go ahead and if you want to just mention a few key players on each rosters and then a little bit of the coaching staff.
I will. It's from a Michigan State perspective, it was a time in college football for really both of these teams when if you could run the ball, and there was a statistic, and I don't have it in front of me, but the belief is that the team that runs the ball the best in this game would win the game. And Michigan State had two pretty good running backs, Tico Duckett and Highland Hickson, who both had, I believe, over 1,000 yards and were really interchangeable. And Tico Duckett is actually he's the father of TJ Duckett, who also played at Michigan State and starred for the Atlanta Falcons for a few years. And Michigan State had a quarterback receiver combo, Dan Enos and Courtney Hawkins, who both are college football coaches and have been head coaches at one time. So Michigan State had some players in Michigan. You already mentioned, the Desmond Howard connection, who ends up winning the Heisman Trophy the following year, but he became a Heisman Trophy winner, superstar. Derek Alexander played in the NFL. John Vaughn at running back. Elvis Grbac was a pretty serviceable quarterback in the NFL. And Trip Welburn was an All-American player in the secondary. So both teams were loaded in. Ironically, what's crazy is as good as the players were, you could argue that the coaching staff was even better. So Michigan State, was led by George Perlis, who, was controversial and ended up being let go later on in his career. But he took Michigan State back to the Rose Bowl, and he was a big part of the steel curtain for the Pittsburgh Steelers earlier in his career before he got to Michigan State. And Norm Parker, who ended up becoming a Frank Broyles Award winner for the best assistant coach in college football at Iowa, was on that staff. So they had a really good coaching staff in Michigan. Listen to these names of guys who became NFL head coaches or national championship coaches in college. So Gary Moeller took over for Bo Schembechler. Jim Herman, who became a defensive coordinator at Michigan and then later on coached in the NFL. Cam Cameron, who's considered an offensive guru, who became a head coach in the NFL, and of course Les Miles, who ended up winning, national championships at LSU. So that coaching staff was incredible. And so again, the lead up to this game was something. It was the first time Michigan had been ranked number one in a long time, and it was exciting. It was a mid-October game. The weather was beautiful, and just the lead up to it was incredible because again, the game always means something in this rivalry, but especially this year when both of these teams were really good and they, like I mentioned, earlier with some of their results, they both easily could have been outright Big Ten champions.
So one player I'd like to mention on Michigan's team, which is pretty interesting, and he ends up making a big play in this game, is Chris Hutchinson, who was the father of Aiden Hutchinson, who most people kind of know. Aiden Hutchinson, one of the classic players in Michigan, and right now maybe one of the best defensive players in all NFL, playing for the Detroit Lions. So, kind of an interesting connection there.
Yeah, he was fantastic player as well, and not a surprise that Aiden followed his dad and going to the University of Michigan.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, are we ready to get into this, Ryan?
I am, Dan.
So
We've
we're
been talking
gonna-
about it too long. Let's go.
So we're gonna dive into this thing here. We're gonna start it off. You're gonna see the intro, and it's just dripping with nostalgia, man. You're gonna see the graphics. You're gonna hear the music, and then Keith Jackson's gonna bring us in.
As you look at the day, you could form the opinion the weather god is indeed a football fan. It is the brightest, warmest day of the week. And more than 100,000 people have gathered at Michigan Stadium in Ann Arbor for the annual ruckus between the Michigan State Spartans and the Michigan Wolverines.
But the largest and best-selling T-shirt on the Ann Arbor campus this week, this one. Michigan, #1 versus Michigan State. No one.
100-pounder from
All right, so you see Jack Root showing the T-shirt there that was going across Michigan's campus all week. Pretty spectacular stuff there.
It's perfect. That is college football right there.
Exactly.
It wasn't going too far. It wasn't a personal attack, but that was just egg on your little brother a little bit.
Yeah, not quite Catholics versus convicts type
No.
type T-shirt that we would see a few years earlier, but still pretty funny. And we're gonna get into the start here. Michigan gets the opening kickoff, and they're gonna start here at the 35-yard line.
Florissant, Missouri. And on first down, Grbac swings it out to Vaughn. Get him out there one-on-one. He's
We
very
get a
quick.
little swing route to Vaughn to start things off.
The twist, the stunt, the 4-3 that Michigan State played. Michigan going with no huddle. The pass is
Derek
thrown
Alexander.
outside to Derek Alexander, a sophomore of the Wolverines. The ball is on the Spartan side of the field, and Vaughn brings it for the first down all the way down to the 33-yard line.
Oh, my
Good
God.
hit. On third down and short, they got the first down. Right on the Michigan State 20-yard line.
So at this point, Michigan is driven down to the 15-yard line. I'm going to get a big play here from Derek Alexander.
Bumps it, throws it to the corner. Touchdown, Alexander.
So pretty fascinating play here with Elvis Grbac, because we're gonna mention this at the end of the game, or at the end of the show. But the game we're gonna do next week is Michigan Notre Dame 91, and this play is very reminiscent of Desmond Howard's diving touchdown catch against Notre Dame, the 4th and 1. Um, the classic call, like, oh, they're going for it all. Howard catches in the corner of the end zone. It looks almost exactly the same. The pump fake, almost the same spot on the field, the same corner end zone. But this time it's Derek Alexander with the catch.
Yeah, he like I said, he was awesome. And what do you notice the most about that first drive, Dan? One of the things that stands out to me as a fan is, just how football was played back then, right? You didn't see any shotgun, you saw a lot of play action, right? You saw fullbacks, you saw some smash mouth football. I think you saw a full house backfield. You see that a few times from Michigan. And like I mentioned earlier, the team that felt like they could run the ball the best in this game, was usually the one that came out on top. And that was obvious, in that first drive with Michigan.
Yeah, a lot of double tight end sets, a lot of power sets. But Michigan also has two stud receivers in Derek Alexander and Desmond Howard. So they obviously utilize those guys a great bit as well. But man, it is definitely Big Ten, old school power football you're going to see from both these teams.
And keep in mind too, really, really quick back then, Dan, like like Michigan and Ohio State, like the talk forever has been that those two have owned the Big Ten. But like really back then when it came to recruiting, like those two really owned the Big Ten. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like so think about like you just said, like those guys that like they had all Americans everywhere, Michigan did. And so they were able to get guys who bought into what Michigan football was all about, and they knew they weren't gonna catch 10 passes a game, but like when they got their opportunity, man, they were outstanding.
One thing I want to get into a little bit here, Brian, I want to get your opinion on this. So Michigan start, obviously they're the big favorite. They start off with the ball and they just drive right down the field and they get a spectacular play from Alexander right off the jump. They're up 7-0. So from Michigan State standpoint, they got to be thinking a little bit like, oh boy, like here we go. Like so, if you're a coach on the sideline, what are you saying to your team? If you're already a heavy underdog and you see Michigan just look every bit of what Michigan was to be the number 1 team in the country, looking spectacular, and they drive right down the field on you. What are you saying to your team on the sideline right now?
Yeah, like I mentioned though, like sometimes as fans and coaches, you can get caught up in the common opponent angle, right? And say, oh, this team beat this team, and you lost to that team, and oh, this score was this, and sometimes not fair. That's not fair, but again, Michigan State was competitive with Notre Dame as well, and Michigan was, they both lost to Notre Dame, but they were both really close, and so I don't think Michigan State ever in this rivalry felt like they couldn't hang with Michigan, and so after that, that is a great point though, because Michigan is, kind of was coming out and saying, you know what, hey, we're number 1 and we're going to cram it down your throat and we're going to show you, how good we are and how this game is going to go. And so give the coaching staff and give the players of Michigan State credit for not, just bowing down and say, all right, they said this is a dogfight, let's get after it a little bit. And so that's the sign of a mature football team that knows
Yeah.
that they're pretty good as well. And because you're right, sometimes, when you get punched in the mouth right away, it kind of feels like, oh boy, we're in for a long night. And not that the game would have been over at this point, but if Michigan State were to go 3-and-out that next drive, right, and Michigan were to go down and do the same thing again, those thoughts and those doubts and those things like you're talking, those feelings that you're talking about as a
Yeah.
player and as a coach can definitely seep in.
Yeah. So we're going to jump in here. Michigan State ensuing drive gets a couple first downs. And we're going to jump in here. They're at the Michigan's 45-yard line. They got Duckett running right down the middle of Michigan's defense here.
Michigan 22. And Sebastian Small is in the game. Enos is back to throw it. Passes away. Pass is caught by Tony Rollins.
Another first down. So we're close to goal line territory for Michigan State here.
Farland, number 17, wide at the top of the picture up there. Enos stands up, looks for it, pulls it down, takes off, touchdown.
We got Dan Enos scrambling up the middle for a touchdown for Michigan State. So how huge is that for State to to answer back immediately with another long drive of their own to tie this game 7-7.
It was almost like watching that, back in the day, it was almost like Michigan State was just like, okay, like we're just as good. We're going to go to do the same thing that you did to us, and they weren't afraid. They didn't, back down, and they let Michigan know we're here for 4 quarters. So huge. Like I mentioned, even if I think Michigan State, even let's say they were to get a field goal there, they would still feel pretty good. But like putting it in the end zone is like, all right, like going toe to toe, right? We're not backing down. That was critical. And Michigan was probably put on notice as well, like, hey, all right, let's go, buckle up.
Yeah, from a physical standpoint too, to be able to run like right down the middle, right down the gut on Michigan, because you're thinking with these two teams matched up, you think Michigan's probably gonna have the advantage in the trenches, but Michigan State just took it right to them, man, and ran it right down the field on them.
They did, and sometimes this happens in football, especially early on. It's very hard to simulate, game speed during the practice week. And so if you're not used to going up against a big offensive line like that and a big fullbacks like that, it's hard to simulate that in practice. It takes those defensive players a while to, get adjusted to that a little bit, the physicality of it. But again, both teams were physical all game long.
Yeah. We're going to bring it back now with Michigan. That this is their second drive of the game. We're starting at the 25-yard line here.
And there at a tight end position, that's him in motion. Give it back to Vaughn, and there's a big hole for John Vaughn. One man.
John Vaughn with a huge run down to Michigan's 32-yard line.
And a big play for Vaughn, and first down Michigan at the Michigan State 33. Win here today, they'll be back among them. Second down and 8. Herbeck down the middle, wide open Howard. Desmond Howard.
Play action. Classic play at Michigan play action to Desmond Howard.
Vaughn is back in now at tailback on first down at the Michigan State 13. He's got the ball.
Vaughn takes it down the sideline to Michigan's 2-yard line. So I'm going to pause it here. So we got a big series coming up here. Michigan's going to have the ball here. They get stopped 3 times in a row. All right, running inside. So we're going to have 4th and goal. One of the biggest plays of the game here. So if you're Gary Moeller here, Brian, what are you thinking here? You're Michigan. You're the #1 team in the country. You got a 4th and goal on Michigan State's 1-yard line. Are you thinking doing anything tricky? Or are you just pounding the football here?
Yeah, I think you do what you are most accustomed to doing, and you've been running the ball all game, and that's what your program is built on. You absolutely run the ball down your rival's throat. Like that has to be your mindset in that situation. And I believe that was their mindset in that situation.
So I'm going to say I think this is a big, big turning point in this football game. So we're tied 7-7. This is 4th and goal from Michigan State's 1-yard line.
He's going for it now. Bennett's a run the same side, right side. I'll tell you what, a Michigan field goal here, or first and goal from the 3 is a win for Michigan State in this particular skirmish. That's Vaughn bouncing outside, going to the goal line, and he did not score. And that's a win for Michigan State in the skirmish.
Michigan State gets the stop. Just a huge, huge play in this football game.
Side. Big man right there. He makes the first hit, and then his friends come and help.
So Vaughn gets stuffed there, and then what are you thinking now with Michigan State? You get a goal line stand. I mean, and it's just 4 plays, just trying to smash the ball up the middle, and you stop them 4 straight times. I mean, Michigan State's got to be elated on the sidelines right now.
Absolutely elated. And another point to that, Dan, later on in this game, there's a play we're going to talk about that happened to be, inside the 5-yard line like that, is questioned and will be talked about or is talked about, forever. That play that we just saw right there, that stop by Michigan State, might have had something to do with that later on play call.
Because we're going to see the most important play and one of the most important plays in this rivalry.
No doubt.
Completely different formation, a completely
doubt.
different style.
No doubt. But a lot of things have to go right when you pull off an upset. And again, it was an upset. Michigan State wasn't, like I said, they're 2 really good teams, but at that time still Michigan was more talented. Michigan was a better football team, but a lot of things have to go right, whether it be turnovers or whether it be fantastic field position the entire time, or just simply the team that's favored makes a lot of mistakes. Or in that situation, like you get a big stop right there. And this, Dan, I'm not a huge momentum guy but like don't kid yourself. Like emotionally, you're Michigan State, you're like, holy heck, like we just stopped those guys. And again, you can talk about and we talk about it's a long football game, you just keep playing, but man, like that's a huge win for Michigan State to get that stop.
And for Michigan State, would you have any thought of kicking the field goal there to take
Again,
the lead, or is it just, hey, we're number one, we're going to run this down the
I
field
I
and get
think
the touchdown?
I think exactly what you said. I think it's a mindset thing. I think
Yeah.
you're Michigan. It's what you do, and let's just pound it down their throat because we've been doing it, and really they've been doing it all game up to this point. You know, they've been able to run the football at will, and they have better players, and Michigan State just made a play.
Yeah. So following that goal line stand, quite a bit of a lull in this game. I think they exchanged punts. I think it's six straight punts between these two teams. So quite a bit of a lull in the game. And then Michigan State gets the ball here. They got about 17 seconds left on the clock, 16 seconds left on the clock. Going in the half, they can go in the half tied seven. Very surprising here. Michigan State tries to get aggressive, and it hurts them.
Well, you can hand it off to your back or throw it over. Oh, intercepted! It's Chris Hutchinson with the interception. The ball was tipped, and Hutchinson caught it.
So there, as we mentioned, Chris Hutchinson earlier gets the big interception here. And Brian, what are your thoughts here? It's surprising for Michigan State to be that aggressive, especially we talked about they're more of a running team. You got a 7-on-7 tie. Don't you just want to kind of go at halftime tied here?
I think that you're right. That really goes against what George Perlis was about and what his teams were about, for as long as he was coaching at Michigan State, taking unnecessary risks, especially at that part of the game, like you mentioned. And it's possible it could have been a situation where Morris Watts, the offensive coordinator and the coaching staff, said to Danny, hey, if you're not sure, just throw the ball on the ground. We're not trying to make any mistakes
Yeah.
here at the very least, but, and again, they're college kids that could have made a mistake, but I agree with you. They'll probably look back at that play. They probably looked back and said, "Hey, that was not necessary, not something we should have done, especially in this juncture. We played a great half. At worst, going in at 7-7. That's a win for us at halftime."
So Michigan State's defense put back on the field here. Need to make a play. We got 10 seconds left, and Michigan's going to try to get in field goal range here.
A completion, they could have a field goal shot here. There's the pass. It's Howard. It's good.
So you got Desmond Howard with a big catch, getting Michigan to the 12-yard line. Just a couple seconds left in the half. Now they got an opportunity for a field goal here. Now the interesting thing here with college football. All right, we got it paused here. You can see it. All right, chip shots in college football are not automatic because the hash marks are so wide. So in the NFL, you got much shorter hash marks. The hash marks are basically inside the goalpost. But here in college football, you have very wide hash marks, and the ball is on what would be Michigan's left hash. So what should be a chip shot is actually a really difficult angle. So even though the ball is at the 12-yard line, you think this would be an automatic field goal, but as we're going to see, it is not.
Puts it down. Plenty of leg on it, and it's no good. He hooked it left.
So J.D. Carlson there, kicker for Michigan, misses it the left. And in Michigan State, you got to be feeling. I'm sure Perlis is, breathing a sigh of relief after that because you avoid a complete disaster. I'm sure all Michigan State fans are thinking, "What the heck are you doing? You know what? Just take the 7-on-7.
Absolutely.
Halftime,
Absolutely. And
halftime tie. But Michigan misses the chip shot field goal.
Yeah. And like I mentioned, like certain things have to happen in a rivalry game or if in a game if the upset's going to happen, right? You had a fourth down goal line standing and then you had a chip shot missed field goal and both of those things happened for Michigan State. And you mentioned it's funny you mentioned the hash marks, Dan, and the width of it. Like that's a challenge sometimes for a play caller and an offensive coordinator in college football, right? To make sure that your kicker, which side of the field he's comfortable in. He's comfortable kicking the ball from. If you're going down to make a game-winning or a game-tying kick, you got to be aware of that, and that's difficult. That you're correct. You don't see in the NFL as much.
Yeah, it's almost you almost better off being at like the 20, 22-yard line to kick that field goal as opposed to from the 12 and in
No
if you're
doubt.
going to be on the hash because it's such a weird angle that you got to kick it in. So
No
not
doubt.
something you see, definitely something you don't see in the NFL. But definitely a rare thing that comes up every once in a while in college football with the hash marks, and it came back to bite Michigan there. They missed the field goal. So we go into halftime. It's tied 7-7. If you're Perlis here, Brian, what are you saying to your team here? You're tied 7-7. You got to believe, got to know Michigan's going to be coming out and giving them their best shot. What are you talking to your team if you're Michigan State right now?
If you're Michigan State, you're telling your guys, let's just keep doing what we're doing, and that's the best that they got. That's the number one team in the country, and you're tied with them at halftime, right? And it's really simple. They're not getting, they're getting blown off the ball a little bit, but again, it's a 7-7 football game. You're just as physical as they've been, and you've had some crucial stops. So it's it's two more quarters of opportunity. Just give a little bit more than your rival is, and you're coming out with a win.
Yeah. So they come out of halftime, they exchange a couple punts. So, obviously Michigan State didn't, they're still hanging right with them. They're still going toe to toe with them. This is going to be the start of Michigan's second drive of the second half. Again, we're tied 7-7.
Third down and 7.
So a big third down here.
Oh, he's got Howard down the middle. Oh,
Desmond Howard wide open over the middle.
I mean, he was lonesome. He could catch the flute and get over it before somebody found him. Wide open.
At this point, you see the graphic. 6 catches for 103 yards already for Desmond Howard. So I know that here we go with third and goal for Michigan here.
Under pressure to the corner. No!
So you got it here. Pass to Derek Alexander in the corner of the end zone, and you get pass interference.
Flag goes down.
I think that's
It's a
always the
huge call.
Dan, worst feeling for a fan. You're watching this game, you're feeling good. Again, hey, holding these guys to a field goal. We're going to pull off this upset, and third and goal from the 13, and you get a flag.
So one of those deals too, Brian, Gerbach got hit, so that ball kind of went really high up in the air. It's tough for a defensive back because you're playing him man to man, and then all of a sudden he starts coming back towards you, and you can't see the ball. You get out of position, and that's exactly what happened. He ends up grabbing Alexander and gives Michigan a first and goal.
First down and goal.
This is a great formation that you'll never see in 2000.
Wishbone.
Seventh tie. It goes to John Vaughn. Touchdown. Ball is loose. He don't get the touchdown. Michigan State picks it up.
So for a minute here, you think Michigan State fans got to be going nuts. They think they just got a fumble recovery, another goal line stop, but the referees end up convening here, and they end up making the right call and say that Vaughn was down at the 1 yard line. But man, you can see here Michigan State fans just going crazy because they think they got another stop. But again, you had these shifts in emotion, right? Like if this was a fumble or if the referees didn't convene here, and they do a good job coming together and making the right call. But if they don't, and Michigan State gets this fumble, talk about a huge change in this game.
Running to the right side on the goal line.
With the showing the replay here, and you're gonna see him. He's down. Yeah, he's obviously down. And the very next play, on right over the top. So Michigan takes the lead 14-7 here. So Michigan State's going to get the ball. We're jumping in Michigan State's drive here. They're going to get the ball here right at the 43-yard line.
Michigan. There's a familiar name at that outside backer position, playing himself back into shape. Pass is thrown down the middle by Enos to Prince, the tight end. Enos hands it away to Hickson. Hickson gets around the corner.
So again, Michigan State just running the ball down Michigan's throat here, Brian.
Which I think is as much as, like I said, again, the running game back in 1990, that was everything in this game. I still think people, in Michigan was probably even surprised that Michigan State was able to run the ball like they did this game.
Duckett's got it. Behind Roy, the fullback.
Duckett picking up another first down. You can give him first and goal.
Third down and goal.
Fast forward to third and goal here now.
Enos back, wants to throw. Gotta throw it. Down.
And Enos does a great job. We saw him scramble and get a big first down earlier in this drive. Here he scrambles to create more time to get the ball off to Hickson. Enos did a great job throughout this game. We saw in their first touchdown drive with this scramble and run up the middle for the touchdown. So he really did a great job of creating time and giving him more options for himself.
I think he was a very underrated college quarterback for what they did. I think he was perfect for that for that team in this style of offense. And to occasionally make plays like that, like he did right there, if that ends up becoming a field goal and the score's 14-10, who knows if Michigan State ever recovers and they go,
Yeah.
score for score back and forth. So great play.
Well, again, and in the way to answer too. I mean, they're staying up. They're going toe to toe with them. They never get behind. This isn't one of those cases where, one of the teams gets behind. It's a big comeback. Like this is just a toe to toe. They're standing right in front of each other and going at it. Like it's just a great football game.
At some point, I remember watching it thinking, how long can Michigan State keep this up?
And there we go. A big play for Michigan State's defense. They get an interception and an overthrow by Gerbach. And now Michigan State's, they got to start really thinking now at this point, like, yeah, this is not only are we in this, like, we're going to win this thing. Like, we're going to go and win this football game after you get this big interception. After you tied it on the previous drive and now you get a big interception off of Gerbach. You got to be thinking we're going to win this football game.
To your point, they've answered two Michigan scores with scores of their own. They had a goal line stop on fourth down, and they have a second half turnover.
Yep.
Right.
So they, after the interception, made a block in the back, but Michigan State's going to pick the ball up here at their own 30.
Drops the throw. Drops it off underneath to Hickson. Hickson.
Again, just, I mean, running right up the middle of Michigan's defense. Another scramble for Enos.
Gets a little help on the corner. Third down and 10.
So here, a big 3rd and 10 here.
Got it. Ridley. They're now in Langlow's range, too. 6 minutes to go in the ball game. Up the middle, Hickson. Oh, he's loose. Touchdown, Spartan.
So after picking up that big 3rd and 10 with a pass play from Enos, you get Hickson with a run right up the middle, again, gashing Michigan's defense to give Michigan State the lead here with just about 6 minutes to go.
And the one thing about, going up against powerful running teams is, it's like taking those body blows in a boxing match. Like it's physical. And as the game goes on, it gets harder and harder and more challenging for defenders to get off blocks. They're getting more tired. They're not as crisp. And so on that play right there, especially, and I remember thinking this, like that was one where I thought it looked like Michigan State was wearing down Michigan's defense a little bit.
All right, so Michigan State takes the lead 21-14. As you said, we talked about after that interception, Michigan State's feeling like, yeah, we're going to win this thing. And then they come down and drive after the interception and run it right up the middle for a big touchdown to take the lead. Michigan State's got to be feeling fantastic here. And, you hate momentum, but they definitely have it right now, if there is such a thing. And definitely the emotions are on Michigan State's side. With 6 minutes to go, they got a one touchdown lead. But Michigan's got a player on their side who's pretty darn good.
Desmond Howard at the 6. Oh, look out. He's going. He's got a convoy. Goodbye. 94 yards. Touchdown.
So the ensuing kickoff right after Michigan State takes the lead. Desmond Howard with a 94-yard kickoff return to once again tie the game.
Special talent. They got, obviously, special players and special talent. He was a special talent. And so,
but what do you do if you got Desmond Howard back there? If you're the kicking team, what do you do? You don't kick it to him.
I don't know if Desmond Howard was. I think this was one of those games where he really became Desmond Howard, and people, and he had some games early in the season already, but this one, you coach special teams too, right? So Michigan State isn't going to be afraid to kick to him, obviously, and it burned him right there. But, I was just going to say too, Michigan State took the lead, and sometimes people might think, how is Michigan feeling? Oh, goodness. Uh-oh, are we going to get upset? But those coaches, again, this is a rivalry game and anything can happen. Everybody's bringing it, bringing their best, and Michigan State's going to be a difficult out. And so Michigan wasn't panicking. They weren't going to be concerned, and I'm sure they were going to have a good offensive drive. But again, when you have players like that, sometimes that can make up for a lot.
Yeah. So again, we're tied, here late in the fourth quarter. Michigan State's going to get the ball back here. They're at their own 30-yard line. Again, scrambling, making time. And Hickson with the big play. But I can't get over again. Dan, it's just making time, man. Making
It's a
time in the
very,
pocket.
you're right, and it's a very underrated part of this game. His ability
Duckett with
to
the
do
big
so.
touchdown again, running right up Michigan's defense. Duckett with the big touchdown. Go ahead. So at this point, Michigan State's got the lead, and we got about 2 minutes left here. Um, Michigan's got to come back. I mean, everything's on the line now at this point for them. They already had the loss to Notre Dame, even though they're the number one team in the country. They have one loss already. So another loss that basically ends any type of national championship at this point. And now, if you lose to Michigan State, you're talking about potential Big Ten losing the Big Ten title here too. So early in the season as well. So everything on the line here for Michigan in this final drive.
A minute 32 to play. First down, Michigan.
They get a big fourth down conversion here to Desmond Howard.
From the 44.
And you can just see the poise of Elvis Scurbach here too. Like you could see how bright the future is for him. A drop by Desmond Howard. An omen of things to come.
Couldn't hold it. Third down, 4. There's your first down. Catch by
Michigan picks up a first down.
They're up there ready to go as soon as
Under a minute now.
this is the principal advantage of the no huddle. To the sideline, Vaughn, get out of bounds, John.
Vaughn doesn't get out of bounds. It forces Michigan to use a timeout. Down to 34 seconds now. Another drop.
Right through his hand. Thrown hard. Maybe a little too much zip on it. 31 seconds.
Another drop. So the fact that Michigan's eventually going to be able to overcome all these drops is pretty crazy. But that was that third drop of this drive.
Dan, one of the other things you notice about this drive is Michigan isn't in the shotgun. Michigan doesn't have 4 receivers. They still have tight ends and fullbacks in the game and are still able to drive the ball down the field. In college football, the clock stops after first downs, and it was just a different game back then.
It was the big fourth down that we were able to pick up. So we're down to 22 seconds left here. You got 22 seconds left here at the 30. Yeah, at what point do you thinking, man, we got to start going towards the end zone?
I mean, pretty soon, and it really depends on what the defense is giving you.
Get Howard down to the 7 here. Interesting here, time's running. Although they got to move the chain so the clock stops.
And right now,
on and off the field here.
And right now, as a coach, Dan, you know what? The coaches are anticipating a score, and they're talking about, okay, are we going for 2 or not?
Yep.
And what's the play going to be?
Yep. So here we go. 13 seconds, 12. Clock's ticking down. Alexander, touchdown with 6 seconds left. So interesting play here, right? It's a back shoulder fade in 1990. Okay, so Bob Greasy's going to end up talking here in a second, but he said, he's almost like it's almost like this was designed, like So you obviously back shoulder fades weren't a thing back in 1990, but you wonder. I wonder if this was designed because
I'm sure it
looks. I mean, I don't think Gerbach underthrew him badly.
No.
It looks like it was a design play, and the way Alexander comes back to the ball. And watch it one more time. Just the way he comes back to it, like you could see like he looked like he knew that was coming. Like it was designed for that to be that way.
Dan, I agree with you. And if you notice too, at the start of the play, the receiver to the other side happened to be Desmond Howard, and he had two defenders over him,
Yeah.
which was rather interesting.
It's a fade and a poorly thrown fade. It almost looks like it was pre-designed because Alexander was
There you
ready to
go.
come back. Do you go for one or do you go for two?
I think they go for two.
He takes this the last time out to talk about it. Six.
So Dan, if you could pause it really quick, like think about again back then and how college football, how things were. So Michigan had the one loss to Notre Dame already. You don't want to get another one. Back then there were ties in college football. So if Michigan ties right here and goes the rest of the season undefeated, for example, and they just have that one loss to Notre Dame and a tie to a pretty good Michigan State team. Did that come
Yeah.
into play a little bit? I wonder if at all that had to do with Gary Muller's thinking here and whether or not to go for one or two, or was it simply no matter what, and there's some mad respect for this going for two. If I wonder if the thinking is we're going for two, we're Michigan. They stopped us on that 4th and 1 earlier. That's not happening. We're the number one team in the country. Let's go get this win.
Yeah, so you're going to hear Keith Jackson kind of bring up, pretty similar to what you're saying, but basically he lays it out like, okay, you're going to go for two if you're going for the national championship. You're kicking the extra point if you're playing for the Big Ten championship. And I think that's pretty poignant. That's pretty straightforward of what it is here, what your decision is. Are you going for the Big Ten title or are you going for the national title? And I don't know. I'm interested to hear what your point is, Brian. But I think from my point of view, if I'm the head coach here, you owe it to the kids to go for the 2 point conversion, right? I think you owe it to the kids to try to go for the national championship.
I think in Michigan for the longest time, even up until 1997, I felt like they were that program that was elite, but not nationally elite, if that makes sense, in how college football was back then and how they were looked at. Because they won a lot of Big Ten championships, they played on a lot of Rose Bowls, they had a lot of 10-win seasons, but they still hadn't had that one year where hey, we're the number one or number two team in the country. We're Notre Dame, we're Miami, that sort of thing. That hadn't happened yet. And so to your point, yeah, you owe it to the kids. I think in that situation, you've worked hard for 4 quarters. Let's go get this win and go celebrate.
Yeah, so pretty interesting here. From Michigan replay that they would have the next day. Now they used to have this all the time. I loved watching this as a kid. Was Michigan replay? They would have that the next day. At the time here it would be Gary Moeller, but they used to have, when I was watching a lot, it was Lloyd Carr who would sit in and you would hear the coach go over everything and talk about. They would go through the highlights of the game and talk about the big decisions. So you're going to hear Gary Moeller. Keith Jackson's going to go over a little bit about the scenario here, but then you're going to hear Gary Moeller discuss what his thinking was and going for two.
The play was already settled. Now they were just talking about what might have happened with blitzes and everything.
Gary Moeller, in his first Michigan State matchup as head coach, has a decision to make.
Yeah, I wanted to go for two. Anytime you ask kids in that emotional setting that what their response is going to be, they aren't going to say, let's tie the game. I wanted to beat Michigan State. That was important. The other thing was in the back of my mind, and one of the reasons that decision came about was the fact that if we win the Big Ten championship outright again, it's never been done in the history of the league. And so you keep going back to that and you say, we got to win them all. And we can't take this opportunity away from the kids to win the game.
So pretty interesting there, Brian. He doesn't mention the national championship. He's more talking about winning the Big Ten for a back-to-back season outright. So, and his thought is, if we tie this, we could potentially, even if we run the table the rest of the way, if Michigan State also runs the table the rest of the way, you were going to share that Big Ten title with Michigan State. You're not going to have the opportunity to win another outright Big Ten championship. So we talked about Keith Jackson leading up to this, and what Gary Mueller had to say. If you go for two, you're going for the national title. If you go for one, you're going for the tie. But or you're going for the Big Ten championship if you go for one. But in actuality, in Gary Muller's mind, at least what he's saying here, he's thinking, I got to go for two so we have an opportunity to win the outright Big Ten championship, and that's never been done before. So again, he's saying like, hey, I owe it to the kids for this. But he's still thinking in his mind, which is a big thing with Michigan, is we don't think about national championships, we think about Big Ten championships, and that was his mindset there.
It was, and Bo Schembechler was unfairly criticized for not winning a national championship, but his mindset and everybody's mindset at Michigan back then was get to the Rose Bowl. Like that was a big thing, and the reason is because back then, the way you chose a national champion was out of your hands as a coach and as a player. It was all based on polling, the coaches' polls and the media poll. So Michigan and Bo Schembechler, I knew at the time, looked at it as, we can't always control what they're going to think of us, especially being from the Midwest and whatnot. So our goal, though, if we can control winning the Rose Bowl or winning the Big Ten and going to the Rose Bowl every year. And so that was their mindset back then. And that is why Gary Mueller, talked a little bit like that and didn't talk about the national championship. The emphasis on the national championship is different now, almost 40 years later than it was back then.
And again, hey, we're going to mention this so much, but it used to be better because this game meant so much for the Big Ten title. Now, with today's in college football, with the expanded playoffs, and we saw it last year, it doesn't matter. Like it does. Ohio State loses to Michigan on their own field, loses a huge upset, but they go in the playoffs and run the table, win the national championship. So what did it really matter that they lost?
I agree, and everybody talked about the goal of college football and the expanding the playoff was to make it more like the NFL. Well, you've made it more like the NFL.
Yeah.
Right? Because there are regular season games in the NFL that Super Bowl champions lose, and they never talk about because they're the Super Bowl champs. But
exactly.
Yeah.
And then the importance of rivalry games. And you see it here because Gary Mueller started off, the first thing he said, he didn't even talk about the Big Ten championships or national championships or anything. He talked about, I wanted to beat Michigan State. That was important to me, beating Michigan State, because beating your rival was incredibly important. And I hate to say it, but nowadays it seems like maybe rivalry games aren't going to matter as much.
We would be wrong to say that it doesn't matter, obviously, right? If you're Ohio State right now, of course, hey, you're national champs and you got a big trophy and you're going to have rings, but those seniors know they're 0-4 against Michigan. Right. And so Michigan can kind of hang their hat on that and say, hey, well, we might have gone 8-6 last year or whatever it was, but we beat you guys, and Ohio State, well, but we're the national champions. So, I mean, it definitely still matters. But to your point, if Ohio State wouldn't have had a chance to play in a national title, 10, 15 years ago, losing that game to
as it was,
Michigan
Brian,
team.
Almost every year that I could ever remember. The stakes were you had to win that game. If you didn't win that game, you weren't winning the Big Ten. And if you weren't winning the Big Ten, you didn't have a shot at the national title. And those things are gone. And it's incredibly disappointing. And the number one thing I take away, he said, yeah, it does matter. It absolutely does matter. Rivalry games still matter. It matters to those kids. It matters to those coaches. It matters to the fan bases. But the stakes aren't nearly as high anymore. They just aren't.
Think about this game here and Gary Muller's thinking, what if they could have been playing each other again 5 weeks, 6 weeks from this game in the Big Ten championship game, right? That
potentially
really,
a third time in the playoff.
Yeah, like come on, like that essentially could have been for seeding, like when all right, like, yeah. So, I digress.
Yeah. So this absolutely mattered. Stakes couldn't be higher right here for this next play. It's 28-27 Michigan State. 6 seconds left. Gary Mueller has made the decision to go for two. And here we go. One of the most controversial plays in college football history, and definitely probably the most controversial play in the history of the Michigan State rivalry.
They're going for the win. An incredible Big Ten football game.
And I think Gary Mueller in his fifth game as University of Michigan coach, is doing the right thing. The number one right.
Yale Van Dyne is lined up in the backfield. He's a wideout.
Yeah.
You got 4 wide receivers.
Defensively, you got a blitz.
Howard dropped it. He dropped it. He dropped it. Howard dropped it.
It's amazing, fans running on the field right after the play. Just amazing. Howard's in disbelief.
He had it. And he dropped it.
It's just a little slant. He starts to the outside. He gets tripped up just a little bit there.
It's still right there in his chest. Even though he was stripped, the ball was still right in his chest.
You know, does he have it long enough for it to be a catch?
Don't know.
That was slow motion the first time. There's the ball. Does he have it long enough that it is a catch?
Dan, looking at that shot right there, I think Michigan State obviously thought it was going to be a run. They left Derek Alexander and Desmond Howard one-on-one.
Eddie Brown tripped him.
Does he have possession? He has possession. I'm sorry.
So I want to ask you, Brian, and maybe you know more than I would know. Bob Greasy is going on and on about maybe it's a catch. To me, I watch, I'm like, pretty obvious it's not. But was it a little bit more lenient in terms of possession back then, especially in college football?
I think it was, and they definitely didn't have the complete the process or any of that nonsense that you hear about.
Well, and we know that well here in the Michigan area with Calvin
right,
Johnson.
definitely. But you know, looking at it, you know, I mean, if you want to use a baseball analogy, is it any different than catching a pop up and then on the transfer he loses the ball, but they still would have called him out? You know, that's I think like all those type of plays, it's a judgment call, and you know, there's so much going into this play that can be second guessed, right? So think about it, you know, Michigan State, you know, leaving those guys one on one, they got lucky, you know, because those two receivers burned them all game. Michigan, like I mentioned earlier, so if you look at that, you know, look at it this view, then the formation, Michigan State was thinking run. That play earlier in the game, the 4th down stop for Michigan State, you have to think that's in the Michigan coach's mind, like, hey, they stopped us and we're on the 3 now, so we're not going to run it. So many things to digest here, and then obviously don't kid yourself, it was a pass interference call. If this play happens in the second quarter, it's a penalty, you know, on Eddie Brown, and that did get called. But if you're a Michigan State fan, you disagree with me. But I think
So
honestly,
let's from a coaching perspective, let's break this play down here, Brian. So we talked about earlier in the game when Michigan got stopped on the goal line, right? The 4 straight plays they get stuffed at the goal line, just power formations, double tight, fullbacks, the whole deal. Here now it's a lot, you know, it's still not truly 4 wide, but it's much more of a spread formation than what you would normally see and what we had seen kind of throughout this game. So you're going to start off with the receiver in the backfield. He comes in motion and then goes into the slot here. So what are you thinking as a coach here? Why do you think Gary Moeller had him do that?
well, probably I think to see what type of coverage you were going to get if it was going to be man or zone, obviously, and sometimes starting the receiver in the backfield, you know, you might get a situation where a linebacker would be covering that receiver, so he goes in motion. He sees it's not a linebacker, it's actually a safety, Mike Iquinello, number 44. So at least he knows there, okay, it's not a matchup where if it was a linebacker, as crazy as it sounds, though, maybe go to Yale Van Dyne and take that shot. But you know, it's confirmed when Yale Van Dyne goes in motion across the formation and Mike Iquinello goes with him that hits man, and you have one-on-one, right, with the future Heisman Trophy winner. And again, he wouldn't have been wrong probably throwing it to Derek Alexander, who had a fantastic game and a fantastic second half as well.
Just look at that. You can see the advantage already. He already caught the touchdown earlier on the backside fade.
Yeah,
so
it could have been
got the advantage there as well.
Definitely. Who knows? You know, again, game plan wise, if they like that matchup better than I think that's Alan Haller covering Derek Alexander at the top. You know, who knows which from a coaching perspective which matchup they like better, but they chose Desmond Howard, and again, it wasn't a bad call. It's a great call. Maybe the throw to me, it didn't look like a perfect, like, quarterback, Elvis Grbac 1-2 plant, throw the slant and put it on the line and just rip it to him right now. He floated it a little bit, which I don't know if that took the timing off of Desmond
Well,
Howard or
I
anything.
would I would say Brian. I think he folded because he thought he's going to be wide open. So you look at this, you get the receiver going in motion. That brings the safety away. So now you don't have a safety in the middle of the field. This corner's playing a little bit more like an outside leverage. It's kind of hard to tell with this look, but it looks like, just looking at the feet, it looks like he's more outside leverage, trying to take away a fade. So what do we
Yeah,
we we, we talk about at the high school level? What is the number one thing as a corner you got to take away?
the
The
slant.
inside
Yeah,
slant.
the slant. Yeah, his eyes are definitely on Desmond Howard though, and his back is slightly turned to the middle of the field. So, but he's got to know slants coming. He's got, he's got to know. He's got to think three
Especially
steps
though,
ahead.
once the safety goes away.
Yeah.
I mean,
He
he's got to know he has no inside help here.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. You're right. But then again, it's a grueling game, late game situation, and another. If you look at the linebacker, who I believe is supposed to be covering the fullback, I think it's Jared Bunch. That's obviously man, because if he wasn't in man, he'd be dropping into kind of like that slant, that hook curl area.
Mhm.
But instead, he's going forward toward the line of scrimmage, toward the fullback, and like so that was obviously man to man. I'm I'm with you. It's bad. Yeah, baffling. I mean, it was a good play call. Like again, it was a good play
Yeah.
call.
I mean, it's exactly what you want. If
Yeah.
you're Michigan here, you're spreading out, you're trying to get Desmond Howard or Derek Alexander, but more, I think, probably Desmond Howard. We've already seen how spectacular he of an athlete he is earlier in this game with the kick return. Um, they know what a special player he is, and to be able to get him one-on-one and to have inside leverage like that, and I mean, you have exactly what you want. You got Elvis Grbac throwing a slant to Desmond Howard in the end zone to win the game. You can't ask
But
for anything more than that from a play caller's
you
perspective.
can't. But remember though, again, back then and even now. So when Michigan football went into that transition into the Rich Rod era, and then back to Brady Hoke, and then more significantly Jim Harbaugh, there's still that belief, Michigan football was built on running the football, right? And it was like that forever. And they got back to it when Jim Harbaugh got hired and it won a national championship. I know for certain there's a segment of the Michigan fan base that are still like, you know what? I know we're at the three, we're at not at the one, and they stopped us earlier, but we are Michigan and we've got some big old offensive linemen, some big old tight ends, and some great running backs. I don't care who's at receiver. You're inside the 3 yard line, right? Hand the ball off and go win us a game. Because I think it was Woody Hayes that said three things happen when you throw a pass, and two of them are bad. And unfortunately, if them are the breaks,
So, despite all that, right? Obviously, he got interfered with. I mean, there's no question.
he
He
did.
got interfered with really twice. I mean, he got grabbed and then he got tripped. Still had an opportunity to catch it, and Brad Greasy thinks he caught it. I don't know. I don't know
Mhm.
about that, but still had a great opportunity. It was right on his chest. Um, but unfortunately for Michigan fans, the ball rippled away, and there's no penalty called. So I'm interested to hear what you got to say, Brian, because we're going to listen. Pretty cool thing here. I had never seen this until we started researching to do this podcast. But Gary Mueller, I don't know if they had a microphone near him or he was actually mic'd up, but you can hear him talk to the officials. And credit to him, he didn't swear or cuss, but he pretty tore down the referees pretty bad after this call. And I'm interested, Brian, like when you have a situation like this, and have you been through this in your career where you have a play that just it's obvious that the referee's made a bad call and it's such a crucial play in the outcome of the game. And how have you handled that and how did you handle with officials?
Yeah, of course it's happened. And it's a little bit different at the high school level compared to this level where, their jobs are on the line sometimes when the calls don't go their way. But, I keep in mind that it's still educational athletics and they're still kids, and we try to teach them life lessons through the game of football. But of course, in this situation, Gary Moeller had every right to be upset, but I wondered, and I go back to this, and it's kind of a hockey analogy is a lot of times officials call games differently in overtime. Unless it's a blatant penalty, they're going to swallow their whistle, as they say. So I wonder if this situation, if the referees are like, "Hey, just we're just letting him play,"
Yeah.
like unless he is okay. Granted, I mean he was tackled, but unless he was two arms around the legs, pulling him to the ground, like
This is pretty close.
this was pretty close. It's possible they're just like, you know what, we're letting these guys play. And but yeah, Gary Mueller had every right to be upset in that situation. And I'm sure George Perlis and those guys are like, oh, we got away with one.
So here we go. We're gonna we're gonna hear Gary Moeller on the sidelines immediately following this call. Pretty amazing stuff here.
He tackled the guy in the end zone. They tackled him. What the hell did you watch? What? That's what Did you look at the receipt? Let's go. Let's go. Oh my God. Hey, you can't choke like that. It's your job to identify. You gotta look at it. Your job is to watch the play. You didn't see him grab him. What were you looking at? You just lost us the game. I want you to know that. I want you to know it, and I hope you bear that the rest of your life, son, because you screwed us big time. Big time. Did you watch the players? Or would you watch the ball? You gotta be kidding me. You guys are unbelievable. That is unbelievable.
I think I'm happy that we went for it. I'm very disappointed in the fact that, let's say it honestly, that we got it taken away from us a little bit in the way that we did.
You gotta be kidding. The big play and they choke. You just flat choke.
Sometimes officials just don't want to do anything in those circumstances. Just let the kids play and let the outcome happen. And really we're neglectful in this circumstance.
So there you have it. Oh man.
That's
I hope you bear this for the rest of your life, son.
God, that's a
You
lot to
screwed us.
That's a lot to digest, but I'm sure the Michigan staff and Gary Mueller, looking back on it, looking at the entire game, the argument is always, one play doesn't cost a game. There are so many times, again, the fourth down stop, the turnover, the inability to stop Michigan State when Michigan State, answered those so many times, the inability to stop Dan Enos to make plays in crucial situations. And there's so many plays that determine the outcome of a game. But in the heat of the moment, like you mentioned, the circumstances of this game as the number one team in the country, like, wow. He had every right to feel that way.
Yeah. Like again, credit to him for not swearing and cussing the guy out. But outside of swearing, that's a pretty intense thing. I hope you bear this for the rest of your life. Is a pretty epic statement to make to an official after a bad call. But oh, go ahead, Brian.
I was gonna say, you notice too, he did follow it up with, sometimes officials like to let the play out and let the kids play, and so I mean he acknowledges that happens at times.
Yeah.
And
24 hours later, he got that part of it. Yeah, after he was
sure.
cooled down a little bit. I hope he apologized to that official
for sure
for what he said to him, because that's pretty intense. So
yeah.
So despite all of that, all right, we still got 6 seconds left here, and Michigan down 1, and they're going to kick an onside kick.
Larry Camp directed it. Rolling around, onside kick. Michigan's got it. Clock hasn't moved.
So just when you think it's over, you think the game's over, Michigan State has won. Even Keith Jackson here, he's talking about the producers at the broadcast, and like it's over. And then out of nowhere, they get the onside kick, and no time comes off. So you got 6 seconds left, and they got the ball near the 45-yard line of Michigan State. So I'm wondering here, Brian, what are you thinking here as a coach, as a play caller here? You got 6 seconds left. You got no timeouts though. But you're down 1. Are you trying to get something here to the sideline? We can see it paused here. I mean, they look like they got some opportunities here to maybe get a quick out to the sideline.
Yeah, potentially, but I think you don't want to run the risk of not having any shot at the end zone or not having any shot to kick a field goal, right? You don't want that risk, and so at this point, I'm probably thinking, hey, we're going to the end zone right now.
Yeah.
We're just going to go to the end zone right now, because maybe another 5-6 yards isn't enough anywhere for our kicker. There's so much that goes into that mindset. But for me,
Yeah,
I'd be thinking like we got to make sure we get a shot at the very least, give us a chance to win.
maybe if you had 9 to 10 seconds or a little bit more,
Yep.
maybe you have an opportunity. It gives you a little bit more leeway, but 6 seconds, that's tough. That's tough to ask to get a pitch and catch and get out of bounds to give yourself enough time because you're thinking you probably got to get to 30, maybe the 35. I'm not sure what Carlson's range was, but I would think at least you got to get to the 35. You're talking about a 12 to 15 yard play. That's going to be tough. So I agree with you here. Like you got to at least give yourself some type of shot. You don't want to just end the game with the clock running out and you never even really have a chance at it. So Gerbeck's gonna try to fire it to the end zone and we're gonna see what happens.
Can you get 15 and have a second left out of bounds? You need 15. Pressure's coming. Gerbeck's running. Got to throw it. There it goes. Intercepted by Michigan State, and the game is over.
Man, he almost got a tip around, man. It ball tipped up a little bit. He almost got it, man. So I mean, down to the bitter last second. But Michigan State gets the win, man. The huge upset victory
Michigan State
over
Spartans
Michigan.
have defeated the Michigan Wolverines 28-27.
So what are your thoughts here, man? Pretty absolutely epic game. And we're gonna get into a little bit, we got a little bit of a post game, pretty cool from Channel 7. But I just want to get your thoughts, Brian. The game ends here. The Hail Mary falls short for Michigan, and Michigan State pulls off the upset, man.
I've got goosebumps. I mean, here in our state, we obviously take this rivalry seriously, but I think it's an underrated rivalry nationally. And there's been some great games over the years. And yeah, just looking back on it and watching this again just reminds me of being a kid watching this game. And it was a lot of fun. And like we talked about the ramifications of this, and Gary Mueller talked about it. There was a four-way tie for first place in the Big Ten. You know, all teams that were 6-2, and Michigan and Michigan State had so many close losses this year that their season could have been dramatically different. Michigan's season is dramatically different if they win this game.
Yeah.
And so. Yeah, man, that's what makes this rivalry great, and what makes a sport great. There's so many close games and so many intense, rivalries that there's nothing like it.
So found this doing some research, just looking around YouTube, find some different things, and this is Channel 7, locally here, Detroit area. The post game because this game was on ABC, so this is immediately following the game, and one of the great reporters that we have had here locally, Don Shane, who unfortunately passed away over the last few years, but he was a reporter here for Channel 7, and he'll end up giving the report here. So a cool little video we're gonna play here.
This is Channel 7 Saturday Action News with Detroit's first news team.
Good evening, everyone. David has done it again. Goliath is dead. Michigan State has upset #1 ranked Michigan in college football. It was billed as the state's civil war, and as many of you just saw here on Channel 7, this one was really a battle. We have 2 live reports from Ann Arbor about the big game. We begin our coverage with Don Shane, who joins us now in this live action camera report. Don?
All right, Frank, thank you very much. What an incredible finish, one of the best finishes without doubt to a Michigan State game. And you can imagine the Michigan coaches at this point are going to complain over and over and over again about the problems and what happened to Desmond Howard in the end zone on that 2-point conversion attempt when he grabbed his jersey and got thrown down into the end zone. They thought he had it, of course. They thought there was interference. It was not called. Now, the other thing is you got to give Michigan State credit for playing one of the best games they have played this year. George Perlis, tears of joy coming down his cheeks as he came up the tunnel into the locker room. These are some pretty happy Michigan State players. Is the curse, I guess, the jinx on Michigan. Every time they get ranked #1, something bad seems to happen to them, and they lose today to Michigan State in an absolute thriller, 28-27.
More on today's thrilling game. Don, I know they're upset by the call. You got more.
Well, you can be guaranteed about that they're going to complain about that until now to the end of the year, but Gary Moeller will probably say, forget it, there's nothing you can do, the game is over. There were a number of controversial calls in this game that could have gone either way and affected the outcome, but that one certainly did. And give Gary Moeller some credit. He went for two, knowing that the Big Ten championship maybe is on the line, the national championship may be on the line. You certainly like to see him do that, but that don't take anything away from the game that Dan Enos and Hickson and George Perlis' gang played today. They played one marvelous football game, and when this thing was over, I rushed onto the field and talked with Dan Enos about this big upset.
I feel great. I'm really excited. I can't tell you how good I feel.
You guys all along obviously felt as if you could beat these guys.
Nobody thought we could win. All the media thought we were going to lose. We're a family. We don't care what nobody thinks about us.
An absolutely crazy scene on the field, but the Spartans with the big upset today, and we'll have the complete locker room story for you tonight at 11 o'clock. I'm Don Shane reporting live from Ann Arbor. Jay, back to you.
All right. Anyway, you look at it, Michigan certainly had its chances, that's for sure, Don.
So there was Don Shane from Channel 7 kind of giving the breakdown after the game. And then this is Gary Moeller in the locker room talking to his players after the game.
Guy tackles Desmond, you don't get a call, but that's part of living. Now, what we got to do is stay focused on where we're going and what we want to accomplish as far as the Big Ten race, and we can still do that. Now, all that has to happen is we got to win the rest of them. Michigan State's got to get beat some way, which that could very well happen. But we got work cut out for us. There's a lot of guys with great effort out there. I think today we didn't score the one time we got down there. We missed a chip shot field goal. We can't do that. And then our defense, I know you're banged up and there's injuries. And you always got to have a guy ready to go. And we didn't have, I don't think, a couple people ready to go. And that hurt us because no one ever has taken the ball, particularly that team. That team went across our goal line 4 times today. That's as many as they've crossed our goal line in the previous 7 years. So we got to work our way back. We got a lot of things to do. But we aren't dead yet. There's going to be some guys that probably play pretty damn well. We're going to keep ourselves together. We're going to give us direction. We're going to know where we're going to go. Now we're going to find out who we can count on, right? But we got to be ready to go to work. I don't want to hang our heads. Don't want to do anything like that. But we got to play a lot better football than what we played today. And as I said, we're going to find some guys played pretty good. That's it.
Dan, say this about Gary Moeller. He's brutally honest.
Yeah, pretty interesting there. And then you could hear Gary Brandstatter, who voices over Michigan Replay Show in the Detroit newspaper. It must have been a few days later that the Big Ten officials actually came out and admitted that they blew the call. So
brutally honest. Don Shane mentioned George Perlis is in tears. That's how important the game was to him. And Gary Moeller flat out is, well, we missed a field goal. Defense, we couldn't stop. Couldn't stop them. They crossed the goal line 4 times, and we had guys banged up, and some others weren't ready to go. And man, that was something.
Yeah, definitely some interesting things from Gary Moeller that I had not heard before we did this. The biggest thing I'm going to take away from this whole show, this first show, is that him talking to the officials stuff. God, that is something else, man. That is something else. But man, what a classic! What a just an epic game. And for me personally, man, I didn't watch this game. I may have watched it, but I was 3 years old at the time. So you're a little bit older than me, Brian. So you might have a little bit more memories of this than actually watching it. But I know, like, my first memories are kind of over the game that we're going to talk about next week, which is Michigan and Notre Dame. Those are kind of my first memories. But I just remember seeing this play over and over and over again. And every year Michigan and Michigan State played, they would always play. Even to this day, they still show this play in this game. It's definitely an all-time classic, and thought it was a good one for us to start off with. Man, I really enjoyed this, man, going back and looking at this game.
This was fun, I thought. I mean, this is our first time working exclusively together, and I thought we did okay.
Yeah, we're gonna work out the kinks as we get along here.
Yeah, hopefully we get some positive feedback from our college football fans. But I'm excited. This was a fun one. I'm really excited about next one. So the next one for me, Can I give it away, Dan? Is that all right to
Well, we've
talk
already
about it?
talked about it quite a few
We
times
already
already,
talked
but
about.
yes, you can.
All right. So, keeping the theme, we're going to keep it local. So, when I was a kid, talking about, where Michigan was and where their program was and how they were perceived, this game against Notre Dame was something else in 1991. And it was something else because for me personally, I kind of felt like that was that moment, like, okay, Michigan, like you're definitely a national title contender. And it was a home win against Notre Dame for those that remember. And there was a special call. This was week 2, and Desmond Howard, we talked a little bit about him and his coming out party, but this is one where he put the country on notice. And it was a special 4th and 1 play late in the game. And those who know, and those who don't can listen to us the next time in the next episode
I'm
that
looking
we
forward to
talk.
breaking that play down
It's
and the thoughts behind it and going for it all in 4th and 1.
and
It's
and
pretty interesting.
it is, and analyzing this game and the risk taking that Gary Mueller took, you're not surprised about what
Yeah.
happened,
Yeah.
on
Yeah,
that
that's a good point.
4th and 1 play as well, and then how the rest of that season, Michigan ended up having a great year, and we can dive more into that next week. But definitely excited about that one.
And kind of cool too, because this is a Desmond. He had the big kick return. Obviously, he had a great game in this game,
Mhm.
but everybody remembers him. And yes, he did get tripped. It was interference, but he dropped it. It was in his
Mhm.
hands. He could have caught it, and I'm sure he would tell you, I should have had it. I should have had
Mhm.
it. So we're gonna follow it up with one of his all-time best games, one of those all-time great
Yeah,
catches.
yeah, and
Looking forward to that.
again, one of the reasons Dan college football is special is because of the personalities, and Desmond Howard is a personality, and he did things, and I remember again back then there were a couple games in a row. I mean, the amount of touchdowns he scored from the receiver position, well over 20, that Heisman winning year is just hard. It's just hard to do,
Yeah,
and so
well,
he was
and the
doing it,
special teams plays too.
and the
The kick
special teams
returns.
plays, like he was doing it every week, and yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. It's gonna be a fun one.
Yeah. So thank you all for joining us. This has been the College Football Retro Show. We looked back at the 1990 Michigan State game. As Brian has said, next week we are going to look at the 1991 Michigan versus Notre Dame. So thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.